What is poppin', guys? Kaizuka here with another Genshin Impact video, and this is an especially important one for you Keqing mains out there. I consider myself one of them, right? And that, of course, is the age-old debate of the Black Sword versus the Lion's Roar. Largely considered the two best weapons in the game for her, of course, outside of like a, full refined 5-star sword, right? Of course, yeah, that's gonna outperform like Aquila Favonius, yeah, that's gonna outperform these 4-star weapons, right? But for most players, right? For most players in this game, the best weapons are either the Black Sword or, of course, the Lion's Roar. Now, I finally got both of these to level 80, had to grind out. That's why there's a bit of time between me actually getting the Battle Pass recently, as you guys might know already, and getting it max level. So that way I could properly compare them at the same level. And there are a few major differences, right, to keep in mind, right? Both of these are, let me get this out of the way. Both of these are astounding for her. So if you have one or the other, you are honestly very safe, right? If you have Lion's Roar, you're golden. If you have the Black Sword, you are also golden. So please don't feel bad if you only have one of these and it's not the one that I say is the best in this video, right? Both of them are amazing. So now that that's out of the way, let's talk about the pros and cons of each, right? So let's start with the Lion's Roar, because that's the one I started with, right? And tested at first, the longest period of time. So, as you can see, it has base attack, of course, like any weapon, and attack percent, right? Its second stat is attack percent, which is really good just overall. Very nice to have, increases your DPS nicely. And of course, its ability, this is zero refinement, so this is just a base sword. Both of these are zero refined, so that way it's more comparable. But this is the Bane of Fire and Thunder. So increases damage against enemies affected by Pyro or Electro by 20%. Now this is an absolutely amazing, right? Amazing ability because, of course, Keqing does, Electro damage. So pretty much as long as you're an Electro build, as long as you're using your E, right? Use your E and then teleport, and then, it converts all your damage from white damage into electro damage. So as long as you do that, as long as you're using electro, this is a very good choice. It's going to be increasing all of that damage by 20%, so you get some very nice, consistent numbers, right? All of it's going to be consistent. The only thing is sometimes you gotta have a little bit of uptime issues because if you use an elemental reaction for a second, you'll be using different damage, so it's not always. But of course, it also increases damage against enemies affected by pyro. So if you have a pyro support DPS, it's also going to help a little bit with that, right? So it's not terrible. But the one downside is, of course, if you are fighting an enemy like an Electro Slime or something, it's not going to really help out much against those, right? If you're just using Keqing, you fight an Electro Slime, it's going to be kind of useless in that case. But that's not 90% of the enemies. 90% of the enemies this works on. It's only a few bosses and electro slimes, etc., that this is not very effective on. So for the most part, this is nice, consistent, flat bonus damage across the board, except for a little bit of uptime issue, as I mentioned before. So that's the Lion's Roar in a nutshell, right? It's very solid choice, especially for an electro build. If you're going a physical damage build, then I would not use this. If you're going physical damage build, you probably want to use the prototype Rancor instead, right? But for electro build, it's great. So now let's talk about the Black Sword. Now, at first, I was a little bit skeptical about this, right? I was like, man, the Lion's Roar is an electro weapon. It seems to suit her perfectly. And I'm running an Electro Keqing, right? I play her as an Electro build because honestly, physical is a little bit boring, right? I like to go full on Electro, have the little particles everywhere. It's just so fun, right? It's a lot of fun, and that's what the game's about, is having fun. So I go Electro build. Plus, you get some pretty crazy damage, right? So the base attack, of course, base attack is the same, right? The base attack is the same as with the Lion's Roar, both 449, because of course, because they're both 4-star weapons and the same level, so that's going to be the same. But here's the thing: you get additional crit rate, right? And here's the thing, right? You may think, okay, well, I would rather just have flat attack than crit rate, but crit rate is actually, for other characters, that's probably true, right? But for Keqing, she is a very crit focused build. Let me show you why real quick, right? So go to Keqing, got our, let's see, let me show you this. Go to her talents over here, and then we have her. Here we go. When casting Starward Sword, Keqing's crit rate is increased by 15% and her energy recharge is increased by 15%. This lasts 8 seconds. So Keqing, she has it in her stats, right? She is a very crit focused character. Crit is her bread and butter, right? Which means that having additional crit is only going to make her that much better. You're playing to her strengths, right? While the Lion's Roar kind of is a broad overall thing. This plays to her strength, so you get additional crit rate, right? Then the ability of it is Justice, increases damage dealt by normal and charged attacks by 20%. Additionally, regenerates 60% of attack as HP when normal and charged attacks score a critical hit. Okay, this effect can occur once every 5 seconds. Now this is very phenomenal, right? Damage is increased on your normal and charge attacks by 20%. And here's the thing with Keqing, her main playstyle is basically you use your E, right? You spam charge attack and then you use your ultimate, right? So use your E when it's up, then you spam charge attack ultimate. So you're going to be doing lots and lots of charge attacks, and that increases each of those by 20%, which is a huge the main portion of her damage, to be honest, is charge attack. So that's definitely amazing, right? Especially with her playstyle. And then, of course, what for me is honestly probably my favorite part of the sword, makes it so unique, is regenerate 60% of attack as HP when you have a critical hit. Now, because she is such a crit focused character, she has such a high crit rate, right? You're pretty much be landing critical hits left and right. So that means you're going to be restoring so much HP. It's almost to the point where you really don't always need a healer, right? If instead of running Barbara, this makes it so much easier to run someone like Sing Cho instead of Barbara, right? So normally, if I'm using Lion's Roar, there's content where I absolutely need Barbara. I need her for heals, otherwise I'm just gonna die and I'm screwed. If I try to run Sing Cho, I could heal a little bit, but it's just not enough, right? I still die anyways, it's not enough, and I'm losing out on a bit of damage because Sing Cho does more damage as a support than Barbara, even though he could heal as well. But but if I use the Black Sword, I get healing on her. Her sword heals her every time you get a critical hit, which means I can afford to run Sing Cho. And that also increases my damage. Because if I'm running Sing Cho instead of Barbara, I'm doing more damage with Sing Cho's abilities than Barbara's. Therefore, I'm even doing more damage overall. So you have to kind of take into account the whole team setup, right? Changing your weapon can also affect the rest of your team in this case. So it could really change your team. It could change your playstyle. You could afford to do a little bit more risky maneuvers, right, to get that extra damage in. Whereas there'll be times with the Lion's Roar where I'm like, okay, I gotta dodge this. I can't afford to land a hit here. But then with the with the Black Sword, I can literally survive stuff that I would never have survived. Content bosses, right? There'll be bosses that would completely destroy me. But since I have all these strong heals, I could just keep healing myself and just hit it, get in there, get some crit hits in, and if I need to, I could dip out and just keep going back and forth and healing and pretty much last as long as I want to, right? That's the main thing about this sword. It is great for survivability and for crit, right? So I honestly, at this point, I have to say that the Black Sword to me is better than the Lion's Roar. Now, the Lion's Roar again is an absolutely phenomenal weapon, right? It's great, and it's kind of her signature sword too, right? In the in the game, right? In the trailer for the 1.1 stuff, you saw Keqing. She's using Lion's Roar, so this is her signature weapon. This really does fit her. It's a great choice, right? And of course, increases electro damage, which is amazing because you're an electro character. But overall, I have to say the Black Sword is going to help you out more with the heals because then you could afford to switch out your Barbara or whoever healer you're using for someone that does a bit more damage. And the other thing on top of that is, of course, this sword works even when you're fighting electro enemies, right? If you're fighting electro slimes, it's you could just change your play style to instead of using your stiletto and your E and converting your abilities to electro, you could still afford to just use your regular white damage, right? And it's still going to boost your charge attacks. You're still going to get that charge attack boost. Whereas the Lion's Roar is only going to boost your electro damage, not your charge attack. Yes, you get the attack percent, which is great, but because Keqing is a crit character, the crit rate really helps out a lot. And this means, right, also the biggest thing about this crit rate here is that means you can afford to also put crit damage on your headpiece, right? So normally on your headpiece, you're going to want to either run attack or crit rate, but since you have such a high crit rate, you have Kaching's crit rate inherently, right? And then you have the crit rate of the Black Sword. You could then afford to put a crit damage artifact on, which means you're going to be doing so much more damage overall. Your crit rate's so high that it's just worth it. It's worth it to do additional crit damage. So overall, again, Black Sword is honestly the way to go. Even if you have the Lion's Roar refined once or twice, I'd still go Black Sword. Maybe if you have Lion's Roar Max Refine, then I'd say yeah, go Lion's Roar. But if you have both of them at Refinement Rank 0, to me it's a pretty easy choice. Definitely go Black Sword. But again, please don't feel bad if you don't have it. The Lion's Roar is also great, and it got me through the entire game up until I got this sword. So I hope you guys found this video helpful. If you did, please be sure to rate, comment, subscribe. I'd love to hear your feedback, what you thought about this video, how I can improve. And of course, if you want to see more Genshin Impact, content. But thank you guys so much for watching this video. Kai Zerker out. Peace and booyah.